My name is David Perkins, and I decided to do the movie of Lord of the Flies. So, in Lord of the Flies, my movie analysis paper, I decided to focus on how the entire group was seen as a group and the different concepts that went on as the movie goes. So, the first thing I focused on was first what a group is. A group of people who are forced to interact with each other and they have some type of relationship or bond that keeps them having to work together. So during the movie, it was some kids who got in a plane crash. They landed on an island, and they had nobody else to rely on if they wanted to survive. So the only way they could live is if they had to depend on each other. So luckily, some of them were already friends. They already knew each other because they were all in the military school prior to being in the crash. So that was an advantage for them. Also, they had to interact with each other because they were on an island. The island didn't have any other people, so the only people that they had to look out for them were themselves. Um, During the movie, there are two characters who kind of emerged as leaders. The first one was Ralph, who was a little bit more of like on a straight and narrow path. He was a little more strict, a little bit more about order, and he was the one that tried to lead the group in a positive direction, try to get people to work together. So that was one thing that really set him aside as a leader because he was already a colonel when he was at the military school, and the other kids already recognized that, already saw him as like an authoritative figure. The other person as a leader was Jack, and Jack was he was a little bit of like a mischief kind of. So he kind of led people on the wrong way. People became more violent under his ruling. Um, People just it really went left. Like this movie really went left. Also, there are a couple sociological or social psychological concepts that came during this movie. The first one that I focused on in my paper was de-individuation, which is when people kind of loosen their morals and they adapt to a new set of morals. So while they were on the island, they didn't have to answer their parents, they didn't have to answer their teachers. Excuse me, for the first time, they could do pretty much whatever they wanted. So with that given freedom, a lot of people decided to really do whatever they wanted. Like people started putting each other down. People actually ended up killing one another. Two of the children were killed by the other people in the camp. So I've actually learned about this. Sorry, it's my dog. I actually learned about this book freshman year of high school, and there's like a story about how people went from civilization to turning into kind of like savages. So it was a real representation of what the human race could be like if we didn't have order. Um, Also, throughout the movie, when they loosened their morals, they also loosened how they dressed. They were all, like I said, they were all in military school, so they used to like dressing up every day, being presentable. But by the end of the movie, granted they didn't have clothes, but they were wearing necklaces with like shark teeth on them and all that crazy stuff. They were dirty, extremely dirty. Like the people in Ralph's camp, they were a little bit more well kept. You didn't really see them look too dirty. I feel like they went out in the water and they showered up a little bit. The people that were under Jack's ruling, it was totally different. Like they put blood on their face, they put tar on their face, like they really looked like really like Neanderthals. Like it was kind of crazy how they decided to portray themselves. Um, the last concept that I focused on was groupthink. Groupthink is when people kind of dissolve individual thinking and they focus on coming to a consensus. So we all have had some experience with group thinking when people decide to just go with what the loudest person in the room or maybe the strongest person in the room, people decide to go with that opinion rather than think for themselves. This became a real problem within that society on the island because um, as things started getting bad, people didn't really step in to make things go on the right path. And if it's only one person saying that we should do this and the whole group is going another way, it makes it that much harder for that one person to get that task done. So the main scene that I focused on in my paper was actually about groupthink. So there was a scene in the movie. There are actually two scenes that I focused on. The first one was about. Sorry about that. So the first scene was about where there was a thief among the camp. So in the very beginning of the movie, when everybody was still getting along with each other, there was a Swiss Army knife, and there was something else that was stolen within the camp. Um, and it was brought in a general assembly, and then it was made known. So Ralph was saying that if somebody is stealing from the camp, they need to be handled with accordingly. He wanted to stick towards the merits of things like they already knew before coming onto the island, so it would make it easier. But with it being no rules, the people on the island they just wanted to make an example out of that person, really use violence as a way to keep people under control. And one thing that was really crazy about that was one person said it. One person said like eat shit and die or something like that, and then everybody else really corralled around that idea. And there really wasn't anybody in that whole group that had something wrong with that idea. Because as the camera panned around, everybody was just cheering, and it was kind of crazy because these are all civilized kids, and they've never seen somebody get physically beaten for stealing. But once one person said it, everybody in the group kind of joined on to the idea, and they all started cheering towards that area. The second example of groupthink was in the final scene. So as the movie kind of progressed, they split into two camps under the two different leaders, Ralph and Jack. And Ralph's camp started dwindling down, and it was just him and Piggy. Piggy was another student, obviously from the academy, but Piggy was killed by the people in Jack's camp. So Ralph was all by himself. So for some reason, Jack decided that he wanted to kill Ralph. So he got all of his troops together, and they all went running after him. They set fires, and they really wanted to kill this man. So he's running away in the forest, and he almost gets away. Well, he does end up getting away, but he was seen by two twins, and the twins were a little bit more on the neutral side of wanting to attack Ralph, but because the entire group wanted to attack him, they decided to still go along with the hunt. So actually, prior to that scene, this is something I should have mentioned earlier. Prior to that scene, Ralph was coming to the camp, and the twins warned him. They were saying, you shouldn't be here. The hunters are gonna look out for you. Da da da. So as soon as they said that, Ralph responded. He was like, if something like that happens, it's because you let it happen. So after that, Ralph decided to leave. So ever since then, I feel like that really stuck in the back of the twins' mind. So they didn't want to see Ralph killed, but they also didn't want to stand up to the group either. So they ended up not telling Jack that they had seen him, even though Ralph was caught later. But it still shows that they still had groupthink because they didn't want to stand up to Jack to try and save his life. They still had their own idea, but they went with the general consensus. So that really wraps up my paper. I hope you guys enjoyed this little presentation, and see you in class on Monday.